Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this talk. I shall begin straight away. I have been covering the development of Chinese economy for years. And of those of you who have also covered China, you have seen that over the years, a lot of things have changed. I've been bullish on China for 10 years. And some people say, oh, you're a bit pro-China. Actually, no, I'm not. It's just that I'm like the person who wakes up in the morning at 5 a.m. and I tell you that the sun is going to rise. It is a fact and not something that means that I'm pro-sun. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how Trump is going to save the US economy. Again, it doesn't mean that I am pro-Trump. A lot of people think that Trump is crazy. And if you're one of those, you're in a big company. But that's the reason why he appears crazy and mad. An article has been written about it, why some leaders want to appear mad or crazy. Because if you have people don't know what to expect from you, then there is a possibility that if people cannot predict you, then there's a possibility that you can get the most out of them. For instance, just last month, Trump wanted to deport Colombians back to Colombia. And then the Colombian people said no. So when they refused, he imposed a lot or threatened a lot of tariffs and visa revocations and all that. So that frightened the Colombians. And in the end, they allowed the illegal immigrants to go back to Colombia. So you see, he is threatening you with big things, but in the end, he's quite happy to do what his original intention. It's the same with his threat to Panama. At first, he said he wanted to seize Panama back for USA. But in the end, when Panama said that they'll postpone or they might not renew BRI, that is good enough for Trump. Just a week ago, he said that he wanted to make Gaza a Riviera of the Middle East. Again, you must remember, Trump is determined to bring peace or ceasefire to Gaza. See, the problem is actually Netanyahu. He and his team wants to continue the genocide. And so Trump maybe felt that this is the only way to bring about ceasefire by saying that the US will claim Gaza for itself. Trump could later turn around and say, okay, you Palestinians, you don't have to leave. You can stay and help us develop the Riviera of the Middle East. And if the US presence is there, Israel will not continue to kill Palestinians. And of course, there's a lot of profit for Trump's people as well, big real estate to develop. That's how Trump does things. Remember, way back in his first term, he was threatening North Korea, Kim, but in the end, he came to Singapore and became good friends. So that's his tactic, to frighten you with a lot of things, but in the end, he doesn't expect too much from a concession from you. Also remember that Trump, he's got a lot of enemies. They have tried to kill him. And of course, people say that his enemies are the deep state. Okay? And if you have people out to kill you, maybe the best is to confuse your enemies. Say one day I'm pro-Israel, next day I'm against Israel. And so they don't know where you stand. And so maybe they'll stop trying to kill you. There's much more to Trump 2.0 this term. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you more. But before I go to that, please read this. Okay, first of all, we must understand Trump's primary goal. He wants to make America great again. Okay? And actually, within less than a month, a lot of things have changed in the US. Number one, the latest advertisement for Carl Burger features a very blue-eyed, blonde, girl, skimpily clad girl. And this is totally different from the years of Biden, where such things are considered in bad taste. Bud Light, remember they came out with this very woke advertisement? Bud Light has come out with a new advertisement featuring what they call rednecks or rough Americans. But whether the consumer public will accept it, that's nothing. So that's what Trump is trying to change. More than that, he's trying to change a lot of things which the neocons have been doing for maybe 30 years. This started in the 1990s with the neocons, and their goal was to make America number one. Now, in the old days, before Trump, what do the neocons want? They have two enemies and three proxies. The first enemy is Russia, and the proxy is Ukraine. But of course, we know that the Ukrainians are losing the war, or NATO has lost the war with them. The idea for the US empire is to break up Russia into different parts. Then you can exploit it like they did in the 1990s when the USSR broke up. So Russia to be a cheap source of raw materials. But since Battle of Ukraine is lost, and just a few months ago, Russia demonstrated its Oresnik missile, which is so powerful that the West has no response to it. If there's a non-nuclear war, the Russians will win. Second thing, remember I said two enemies and three proxies? The second proxy is Taiwan. And of course, the enemy is China. What's the purpose of taking on China? The West has always seen China as a cheap source of labor. So can you imagine, ideal? You take cheap raw materials from Russia, take cheap labor from China, you produce, send it back to Europe, and sell a higher markup price. So there's the proxy is Taiwan. But in the past year, I think a US victory in Taiwan or South China Sea is getting less likely. They're less likely to win. Last September, China demonstrated its ICBM missile because at that time there were reports that say that maybe China's ICBM not that great. So they demonstrated that it works. Secondly, in the South China Sea, recently, actually two big incidents in the South China Sea, whereby the US carrier group tried to approach Taiwan or China. So China sent out its super destroyer with anti-jamming equipment. So in this electronic warfare, you try to jam the other opponent. If you can jam the other opponent, then all his missiles will be useless. When the Americans tried to jam the Chinese destroyers' radar, they couldn't. But the Chinese radar could continue to target all the aircraft, all the ships in the aircraft carrier group. So twice the US turned around and went back because you don't want to start fighting because you are blind. China in November came out with its army of robots. This is, if you are my age, remember Star Wars days. Yeah? You don't need actual soldiers anymore. It's all robots. Now, this is actually a big change in the thinking. In SAF, we train people and our soldiers got assistance. With the drone army, you need to change your assistance. It doesn't work anymore. In January, China showed its air superiority with a sixth generation aircraft. It's not in full production yet, but nobody knows. The difference between a fifth and a sixth generation aircraft is that the sixth generation aircraft can fly higher and faster. And once you're higher and faster than your opponent, your missiles will take your opponents easier. And of course, China maybe not in full production yet, but the threat of this coming up has frightened the US. Secondly, just last week, China announced that it's come out with or testing a new air-to-air missiles that can travel 1,000 kilometers. The longest range for US air-to-air missile is 400 kilometers. So can you imagine a Chinese air-to-air missile can hit the American planes before they even see it? Militarily, China appears to be ahead. In economics, China is clearly ahead. But after all, what do you expect from 1.4 billion people competing against 335 million people? No one can match China's industrial capacity, their EVs, 6G, and even they're the biggest exporter of caviar now. In this report came out last year, it shows that Chinese leadership in leading technologies was only maybe less than 4 out of 64. In 2003, the US led in 60 out of 64. Last year, or rather 2023, China leads in 57 out of 64 technologies. So China has really streamed far ahead of the US. For a long time, or for a year or two, US thought that its last area of superiority was safe from attack. And this was demonstrated by Sam Altman 2 years ago when he told an Indian audience, it is totally hopeless for you to come out with an AI platform for less than 10 million. But of course, now we know, just before DeepSeek came out, Trump wanted to extend his superiority by coming out with $500 billion to lead the US in AI. But it's not just DeepSeek. It's also other AI platforms that have come out in the past few weeks. All these developments show that when it comes to Russia, China against the US, really is no match for it in military and in economics. But they can try and sabotage Russia and China. So let's move on to the Middle East. In the Middle East, there are all sorts of factions. They're always fighting, okay? And there comes a third proxy, which is Israel. And the target in this case is China and Russia. Why? Because both China and Russia have got big ambitions for the Middle East. First of all, if there's oil disruption, it will affect China badly. It will affect the world badly, and it will affect global trade. And of course, China needs to sell its goods. So of course, they don't want the shipping lanes to be blocked. Russia has this plan with India to start their own corridor, but this will involve going through Iran. If Iran falls to US, then of course Russia's plans will be shelved. China has Belt and Road Initiative, which Middle East is important because it's connection to Africa. And of course the BRIC, which is also connection to Africa. So if there's any chaos in the Middle East, it's bad for Russia and China. But it can be good for the US and Israel. Why? Because Israel has a long-term plan to expand. This is actually Israel now, but their ambition is to have Israel much greater than what it is today. A lot of Israel soldiers wear this badge saying that is their goal, to expand Israel. So let's come to Gaza. Off Gaza, apparently there's a lot of oil and gas, and this can be tapped. Not that much, not as much as Qatar, but it's quite substantial. And Israel has this plan, which was announced just before October 2023, that they want to connect India to Saudi Arabia and to Greece. So they're starting their own Belt and Road Initiative. But all this was jeopardized with the Hamas uprising. Europe has cut itself off from cheap Russian oil gas. So now it depends on another gas line from Qatar. It must go through Syria, Turkey, and to Europe. So Europe and America, they're all looking at Middle East for their own benefit, just as Russia and China will look at Middle East for its own benefit as well. When oil prices are high, the US oil sellers benefit because they are now the biggest producer and seller of oil in the world. Okay? Maybe that explains why the US empire has been supporting Israel for so long. When I say the word US empire, G7 and NATO, okay? But there's also another reason. The Israel lobby in the US is very strong, and they are very good at getting support from the Americans, both sides of Congress, to support Israel. The truth is, both parties, Israel and America, benefit from this relationship. just like in a mutually beneficial marriage. Last December, when Syria fell, many people see this coup as a win for Israel and US. But as it turns out, there are three things we have to learn. But before I come to that, Israel actually kept on gobbling up more Syrian territory after Assad left. The collapse tells us three things. Money in this world can buy many things. The rebels in Syria were all paid mercenaries. And secondly, why didn't the Arabs support themselves? Because the Arabs support their own sects first, and then their religions, and then their countries. So it's very difficult to get them united. These are historical reasons. And lastly, even though Syria collapsed and people think that Israel and US are ahead, not true. Things have now gotten worse for them. Number one, Turkey has got this problem with the Kurdish population. This is the brown patch. They cover Iran, Iraq, Syria. Erdogan hates them. He would like to kill them if possible. Okay? The trouble is the Kurds side with the US and Israelis. And so now Turkey and Israelis are going to clash. And if they clash, the US will have to take sides with Israel. The trouble is Israel is weak. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis are still around. Reservist soldiers, IDF are all stretched out. No one is investing in Israel. People are running away from Israel. And in terms of Iranian and Israel air superiority, Iran has shown that it can hit and it can defend itself quite well. So Israel is actually in a very weak position. It faces extinction because if people continue to migrate out of Israel, there'll be no more people. So sooner or later, US must make peace with Iran if it wants Israel to exist, because Iran has the backing of China and Russia. And this brings us back to the Riviera. The Riviera is Trump's way of getting a two-state solution. With a two-state solution, Israel will not attack Palestine or Gaza, and the Arabs will rally around it. And of course, the Palestinians will thrive. Like I said, right now he's saying that he should chase them away to Egypt and Jordan. Typical Trump, he'll change his mind, say, oh, why don't you stay and help us build? And that might be actually quite acceptable to the Palestinians. Let's now turn to the clash between the US empire and Russia, China. Since February 2022, when the Ukraine war started, they've been trying to, both Xi Jinping and Putin have been trying to figure out how to take on the US empire. We all know, or you don't want to tell you now, the strength of US empire is based on US dollar. You can print it easily, you can fund your military all over the world. If you can de-dollarize, you take out the base of the US military machine, and that will undermine the US military. This is a real war between the superpowers. If you de-dollarize, then the whole US empire will collapse. In October last year, BRICS came out with a news of a new currency to rival the US dollar. Although at that time, they said that, oh, we're not out to de-dollarize. The aim is there. It's going to, it wants to replace the US dollar. It won't say so. The question now they have to work on the next year is they say that this new currency will be based on all the global South currency, okay? All will be maybe one big exchange for this new currency. But I think there's just a smoke screen. The real currency, the new currency will be based on gold. It's much easier. Gold standard has been done before, and it's easy to bring it back. It is an ideal way. Then the question is, how about those countries who don't have gold? They're going to set up a commodities exchange soon, whereby if you've got palm oil, you got no gold, never mind. In this exchange, palm oil will be equated to how many gold how much gold, and then that's your equivalent. Because right now, all the commodities exchange are manipulated by Western forces. So the price of cocoa may not be the real price. So BRICS wants to set up their own commodities exchange so that everything will be clear. If there's no need for the US dollar, then everybody will start dumping the US dollar. Foreigners hold $32 trillion. Imagine everybody starts dumping. What happens? The US will face hyperinflation. Interest rates will go up, bond yields will go up. It's going to be a mess. And with the US dollar comes down, all the G7 currencies will come down too, because they're all linked by swap lines. And they are all heavily in debt. So when interest rate goes up, they will finish them all. So there are too many problems facing the US. The economy is not doing well. Public banking, property sectors are all broken. US military is outclassed. The interest groups like Big Pharma, military class are all too powerful. Trump wants to take them on. And of course, the US dollar is being threatened by BRICS. Because if nothing is done, if you continue the way Biden has been going, it's going to be a train wreck. It will definitely happen. Just a matter of when. Just like the island of Santorini, everybody expecting an earthquake soon, right? Or volcano. It's going to happen, may not be this year, but history shows that volcanoes do explode once in a while. What must Trump do? He has to start a revolution. There are three things I see him doing. Number one, retreat from empire, revive the US economy, and defend the US dollar. Retreat from empire. US wants to take a lesser role, no longer wants to be the global cop. Why do I say that? Marco Rubio was interviewed a few days ago, and he said this: maybe the US cannot be the unique power in the world. And the US cannot be responsible for looking after affairs all over the world. This is a startling change. Marco Rubio is a real neocon before he took on the job. And it's just like a vegetarian inviting you to a barbecue. You'll be shocked. Because so what Marco Rubio said was a shocker. What has he done? They have reorganized USAID. This is big because USAID is an arm of the neocons. And maybe you go after NED, CIA, and FBI. This will already signal for his inauguration, the neocon leaders in Europe were not invited. Okay. Worse, Musk, who is like maybe Trump's attack dog, has been criticizing the German political process, supporting the opposition, and he's been attacking Starmer. Why? Because actually the British M16 has always been the spiritual capital of Western hegemony. So if you're going to step away from being a super empire, and the British are reluctant to do it, maybe that's why Musk is jumping at them. So he's going to get out of NATO and get out of Europe. Probably America doesn't care about Europe anymore. If you're weak, that's fine. Let one less competitor. Tariffs, the second one. Tariffs, as we all know, has been bandied about for so many months. Chinese exports going down and US imports from China all going down. And in fact, China has beginning to export more to the global south. So any new tariffs will not. But then we need to ask, why is still going back to tariffs? Basically, tariff has a simple reason. If a pair of socks costs $3 in UK and $3 in America, you put a 25% tariff, then the UK socks will cost $4. Now, if you are a consumer in America, then you won't buy British stocks, you buy American stocks, okay? So the tariff is to encourage US output to come up, okay? Because the alternative, if you don't do this, you continue with free trade, America will go to the dogs. So he has to do something. The end is near. Must well do something. It's going to be painful, high inflation, everything, but he wants to do something. The alternative is doom. Third one, how do you save the US dollar? The BRICS currency will come sooner or later and it will undermine the US dollar. So if you don't do anything, the US will be toast too. How to save the US dollar? In the past, if you win a war, you can tell the defeated country to say, your own currency is no longer valid. You must use the US dollar. So the idea of taking down Russia and China is that you can outlaw renminbi and Russian currency, and then all the excess US dollar they printed over the years will no longer be excess. So you save the US dollar. But this option is no longer viable, I told you, because Russia and China seems to be quite powerful. The new BRICS currencies will be backed by commodities. The US is backed by nothing. So what do you do about it? He's got another bright idea. Take over Canada and take over Greenland. It sounds far-fetched, but if you look at it, Canada has 41 million. Greenland has 50,000 people. It's easy to subjugate Greenland. Okay, why? What is there in Greenland? These are the country's top resources. Russia has got the most, 75 trillion. Greenland has 70 trillion. If you take over Greenland, suddenly the US dollar has backing. And the US national debt is only 34. You take Greenland, you got extra 35 trillion for yourself. So that's how you protect the US dollar. Another one is Bitcoin. Gold is a limited analog asset. Bitcoin is a limited digital asset. Trump may want to push up the price of Bitcoin to maybe over $1 million a coin. They can because the Bitcoin exchange is in the States. And what they're trying to do, if they succeed, is to accumulate as many or as much Bitcoin as possible. There's only limited 21 million Bitcoins. Once you take up all, let's say most of the Bitcoin, then you can say it's legal tender. 1 million US dollar equals to 1 Bitcoin. All your bonds that we owe you, okay, I give you half a Bitcoin to settle the debt. Okay? Again, you save the US dollar. Will this happen? Nobody knows. Summary. A US military win over Russia, China is fading. Technological age is fading. De-dollarization will kill the US. Trump is preparing for multilateral war. He's trying to revive the US economy through tariffs. It's going to be painful. And he's trying to protect the US dollar. Is Trump really mad? He's trying to reverse all the neocons' work. He's attacking the big businesses that have exploited Americans. He's coming up with all sorts of trade policies, economic policies, which a lot of economists think is mad. And he's grabbing land legally. But like I said, tariffs, there's no other option. If you don't do anything, US economy will go to the dogs. So he's trying to do something. For me, I think it's too early to judge. Many leaders have been unpopular and hated in their lifetimes, but maybe a few hundred years later, people think that, oh, what he did was quite wise. In our world, I can bring an example. Qin Shi Huang was considered, people hate him, didn't like him because he's trying to unify the language, the weights and systems, everything. Those who oppose him, he'll kill. Okay? In a sense, Trump is doing something like that. He's trying to, remember, three things. Pull the US from being a neocon superpower. Number two, revive the US economy. And the third one, try and save the US economy. In time to come, we'll remember Trump as either Captain America or the idiot or fool. That's it. Thank you.